Hi, my name is Jake. I'm a principal software engineer at CSI and the lead developer of the data station. Let's take a look. Remember that you can always find all of your CSI Cloud apps on our cloud dashboard located at cloud.csiinc.com. First of all, the data station is very much a developer tool, so you should be familiar with terms like webhook and JSON. The data station has two modes of operation. The first one is inbound data, which are essentially webhooks. A good use case for this is you have a third party and they're capable of triggering a webhook, and you want to write some activity data into iMIS. So what that looks like is you define a JSON schema that you and the third party agree on. Once you've got that inputted, you can proceed to configure the properties from the JSON payload and map those to activity columns. You can also hard code data so that the third party is not sending activity type, for example. Once you save that record, we'll generate a webhook URL for you. You can just give that to the third party. There's no authentication or anything like that. You just post to this endpoint with the JSON payload that you've agreed upon, and it should write the activity record. The second mode are outbound transfers. These are very similar to SQL scheduled jobs. A good use case for this would be if you had a third party and you wanted to sync some members on a nightly basis for anyone who had changed that day. So what that looks like is first you define the job itself. You give it an IQA, which contains all of the records that you want to send. Optionally, you can enable a feature that we call delta hashing. What this does is the first time the job runs, we'll take a thumbprint of every record. We don't store any PII, it's just a one-way hashed thumbprint. And then every subsequent run, we will only send the data that changed from the previous run. This is a great way to minimize the amount of records that you're sending to the third party, so you're not synchronizing 100,000 member records every single night. Here you can define your schedule. If you can write a cron tab, I'm impressed. Most people will use our schedule builder here, where you can specify a recurring schedule or a one-time schedule. Here you can define email alerts. So if you want to always receive emails or only receive them on failure, you have the option to do so. Once you've configured the job itself, you can proceed to add one or more steps, which just defines what you want to do with the data in the IQA. So for example, you could send it via HTTP. We have a lot of different options here for configuring how you want to send that. You can specify one or more headers, so we can input a static API key here, for example. We also support payload chunking. So for example, if the third party can only accept maybe 5,000 records at a time, we'll split them out and add a delay in between each call. Note that we support multiple different protocols here, including HTTP, FTP, and SFTP. And on the right, you can configure the template or the data format that you want to use. So here we've configured a JSON template. This is a representation of a single row in the IQA, and so when the job runs, this will be repeated once for each row and get turned into a JSON array. You can also provide CSV, and not only CSV, but you can use any tab delimited or character delimited format with this mode. Once you've completed configuring the job, you can go ahead and wait for the schedule to trigger, or you can actually run a job ad hoc by going to Actions and Run Job Now. You can also view the job history. Here you can review the details of the job, all of the pages that we pulled, any HTTP or communication errors that may have happened, as well as the transmission attempts to the third party. This report is also sent when you subscribe to email notifications as well. Note that with outbound transfers, you actually have the ability to define multiple steps and also conditionally execute those steps only on success or only on failure of previous steps. So for example, if you wanted to send a Teams notification or a Slack notification when the job succeeded or only if the job failed, you could certainly set that up. The way that that's achieved is you can actually define a JSON payload here and mark it as single row mode. What this does is it just sends this data as is, or it sends the first IQA result if you decide to use tokens. This has been a brief overview of our DataStation product. If you're interested and want to learn more, please contact sales@csiinc.com. Thanks.